Well, welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. Again, my name is Jeffrey Davis, and this is the new economic reality version of Radio Entrepreneurs, streaming more stories than ever before. I used to hide behind the cameras. Now I guess I'm out front in the Zoom version. Our viewership is up 40%, and I've been making some posts recently that have been hitting record numbers. We had an interview 2 weeks ago. We got 10,000 views. Thank you, Nathan Gobes, and we hope we can do that with Mark Furman. And we know he's got a face for Zoom. And Mark, welcome back from the law firm of Tarlow, Hart Rodgers, Mark Furman.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Nice to be with you. Many would say it's more face for radio than Zoom, but whatever.
Right. Well, we're all, our better days are behind us probably when it comes to being beautiful. But Mark, you know, so much going on in the legal world right now with the PPP loans and people being arrested. And I think litigation just waiting to happen again throughout this economy. Always interesting to get your perspective for entrepreneurs who are listening in.
So just, I thought we'd talk about a few different things. One very important decision by the SBA just came out. You know, everybody rushed to get in their PPP applications. And then, you know, businesses, a lot of them received money. And then the rules started to evolve. Some people would say change. And people started to get concerned about what they were going to have to go through to get, you know, these grants forgiven. So the SBA has decided to give small businesses a little bit of relief from their concerns about it, as people were thinking about even returning the money to the government. The application required borrowers to certify in good faith that, quote, current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of the business. So, you know, everybody who applied was like at the beginning of the pandemic, they knew their businesses were really challenged. There was tremendous uncertainty. And then because of publicity around companies like Shake Shack and the Los Angeles Lakers and Ruth Chris Steakhouse that received funds that met the eligibility requirements. By the way, the public political and public outcry became so great that they started to change the rules. And, you know, there was a concern that there were going to be very intense audits and second guessing and how it was going to be done and what happens if your cash flow wasn't harmed to the extent that you anticipated. What if the real harm was going to be in the third and fourth quarter, but it wasn't going to show up in the second quarter? You know, there are all these concerns. So the SBA decided that if you took a loan that was less than $2 million, then that was going to be considered to be a good faith, and they weren't going to audit those. So those folks have, who borrowed over $2 million, they should be expecting intense audits and second guessing.
What a gift for small business, small nonprofits that went for under $2 million, that were struggling to survive, needed that Band-Aid to be able to know that they can now run their business and think about the market and their employees and not focus in on all the documentation for an audit. But for those who did get the money over $2 million, they've got to be accountable to what they've done. But I think it's a great boom to those small businesses that are just struggling to stay alive.
Yes, you know, I think of it as sort of a Band-Aid because it provides 8 weeks of pay of at least 75% of what people were making before the pandemic. And it allows nonprofits and businesses to pay their rent and utilities. But as a small business owner, one of the owners of a law firm, I think the issue is how long-term this is going to be, the economic impact, and what the third quarter and fourth quarter are going to look like and into 2021. Because the economy isn't going to magically reopen. So this provides relief for 8 weeks of salary and effectively 2 months of rent and utilities. So those are all good things because it's necessary. But where are we going? That is the question. So, this sort of is a lead into another topic I wanted to mention, which is, businesses that are shut down as a result of government orders. They're routinely being told that they can't bring a business interruption insurance claim. And, I think it is worthwhile for people who are shut down due to a government order to think about whether they want to find out whether they have rights and or not. The insurance companies will certainly deny the claims in the first instance because the amount of monies involved are staggering for insurance companies. And most policies do have pandemic insurance exclusions, but there's a question if you're shut down because the government ordered you to shut down. There's a real question about whether those exclusions are the reason that your business is interrupted. You might, in the absence of the government order, been able to figure out a way to operate in a safe way. So, I think Legal Seafood recently brought a suit. Now, they had a unusual situation. They're shut down effectively as a result of governmental orders. And they bought a policy earlier this year that I think much to the insurance company's chagrin, sounds like did not have the pandemic exclusion that most companies started putting into their policies after the SARS outbreak many years ago. So there's an aspect of the devil's in the details, and it's one of those things that you should, as a business owner, think about. And just, when you consider the consequences of what's happened and the impact on your business. Another issue is what we call force majeure. You've made these contractual commitments that you can't fulfill, either because you've been shut down by the government and it's become impossible to perform contracts. Do you have any rights as, let's say you're a tenant of a commercial lease. Let's say you're a supplier of goods. Let's say you've made commitments to customers, but the manufacturer can't get you the goods that you've committed to resale. So you're going to breach your contract with your ultimate customer because the manufacturer couldn't produce the product. Who's going to get stuck here with the liability? It's a huge issue for companies. And, we have unprecedented circumstances, as you know, Jeffrey.
I'm familiar with people telling me, some CFOs that I know, telling me that some of the larger companies that they do business with had contractual arrangements for payment plans, and some of these larger national companies unilaterally changed their payment plans to me, that's potentially a big problem for litigation too, because some of these big corporations did get PPP money, did have a lot of financial resources. They were just hoarding their own cash. And the trickle down effect to, let's say, smaller businesses is really quite awful. The insurance policies, I guess my guess is that some of these insurance companies didn't read their own policies a little bit more carefully before they signed on with their clients. But I'm concerned about all this, all the potential litigation that's going to happen, because that could create another wave of a lot of businesses going out of business. And again, the breaking of contracts is something that I did hear a lot during the what I call stage 1 or stage 2 of the emotional shock of all of this.
Well, what happens if a landlord leases to a restaurant, the restaurant decides to do a build out, they hire a construction company, and in the middle of construction, the pandemic hits and the lease commencement date starts and the construction isn't completed and the restaurant's out of business and doesn't have any money, and the construction company has incurred substantial costs that they haven't been paid for. It's like everybody's impacted: the landlord, the restaurant, the construction company, the employees of the restaurant and the construction company. It all amounts to one giant mess. And the ability to try to negotiate, hopefully, without litigation, but potentially, if needed, to have these companies survive with litigation. Litigation is frequently, most cases settle. You're trying to reach an accommodation that works for everybody. But these are some very challenging circumstances where nobody's to blame and everybody is harmed. And it's just really, really tough.
Well, again, I guess when I was a kid and I used to see people fighting, I never used to think about who was right in the fight. I used to be thinking about who was going to get beat up. And I think that's the situation here. It's not a matter. You're in a litigator. You probably see that much more than I do. Most of the times in a fight, in a street fight, a legal street fight, it's not who's right, who's wins. It's the one who has the better resources and the more money to fight. And again, small businesses did get a Band-Aid, as we started at the beginning of this interview. But if they get themselves into a fight, it's not something that they potentially can win, because they are small business and they have small resources. It's all pretty sad, and it's going to play its way out. And I'm sure you're going to be tracking it and talk to our listeners about it as we go. If someone's looking for advice about how to fight, how to stay out of a fight, how would they find you at Tarlow, Breed, Hart, and Rodgers?
I can be reached at mfurman, Furman, at tbhr-law.com, or at 617-218-2025.
And, without being too specific, let's all from everybody at Radio Entrepreneurs want to congratulate you on the wonderful family event you're expecting coming up. And even with COVID and viruses, life does go on. And congratulations to you, Mark, and your family.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate it.
And remind everybody, this is Radio Entrepreneurs. We're going to stay on top of all the stories that entrepreneurs are using and need to know to stay in business during this economy. We'll be right back after this break with more stories.